welcome to Freeze Frame. This week in Ole Miss football, I'm David Johnson along with Brandon Redd. Thank you for joining us here on the Reb Sports Radio Network as well as on Rebels247.com. It is Alabama week for the Ole Miss Rebels, but before we get into all of the occurrences that will take place in Tuscaloosa on Saturday night, let's take a look back at the Rebels' 39-0 victory over the Tulane Green Wave last Saturday in New Orleans. Brandon, it started off as a very impressive first quarter for the Ole Miss offense before it kind of petered out.
Yeah, no doubt. You know, when you look at that first quarter, Ole Miss offense, they were running on all cylinders. They were running the football well. They were throwing well, and we scored 26 points in that first quarter. And after the first quarter, I'm sure most Ole Miss fans like myself are thinking this is about to be a blowout and it's going to be over quick.
I picked the Rebels to score 55 and felt very comfortable after the first 15 minutes of play down there that they would reach that goal. However, that would not be the case. Ole Miss gets the 39-0 victory, improved to 3-1 on the season. Tulane fell to 0-3. It was the Green Wave's 13th consecutive defeat as Curtis Johnson continues his rebuilding efforts in New Orleans.
Yeah, you know, Tulane, not trying to take anything away from them, but they got a long way to go there, and they're trying to get there, but there wasn't a real good football team we faced last Saturday.
Ole Miss outgained Tulane in the first quarter alone, 183 yards to 14. And it certainly looked like there would be nothing the Green Wave could do to halt the Ole Miss attack.
You know, when you go back and if you watch the film or anything like that, that first quarter, offensive line, the wide receivers, the quarterback, every play the offense made was dominating the Tulane defense, and there was nothing Tulane could do to stop the Ole Miss offense in the first quarter.
Tulane entered the ball game very short-handed as their starting quarterback Ryan Griffin did not play. Instead, they turned to a true freshman, Devin Powell, and it was as expected for a true freshman going up against an SEC-caliber defense.
Yeah, he kind of walks on the field wide-eyed, and you know that he's thinking, what am I going to do? He hasn't seen a defense with this type of speed yet, and being young and coming from the high school ranks, you know that there was a lot of things he saw Saturday that he's never seen before in his life.
Ole Miss's defense rebounded nicely after that 66-31 loss to Texas the previous week. In the first half, Tulane ran 39 offensive plays and gained only 52 yards.
Yeah, and I love the way our defense was able to pressure the quarterback. That's something we're going to need to see moving forward, but we had great pressure, and it was more than just bringing linebackers. There's a lot of defensive ends getting off their blocks, and that's something we need. We need our 4 defensive linemen to get to the quarterback by themselves.
We knew going into this ball game Tulane would struggle in their efforts to run the football. At halftime against the Rebels on Saturday, Tulane had negative 25 rushing yards, factored into that 3 quarterback sacks by the Rebel defense.
Yeah, I mean, when you're able to get to the quarterback, that just it pressures him and he's in trouble. And then when they tried running the football, they were going nowhere, David.
Barry Brunetti ends up playing the bulk of the second half as Bo Wallace pulled himself out of that ball game. Because of a sore shoulder, Wallace ends up completing 7 of 16 passes for 101 yards and a touchdown. Brunetti played admirably in his stead.
Yeah. I mean, I think Brunetti came in. He was a game manager, and it's always fun watching Brunetti run the football. When he has it in his hands, not only can he juke and jive you out of the way, but he can lower that shoulder and he can run over you.
Rebels also played a third quarterback Saturday down at Tulane, Mikael Miller. Kind of not expecting to see Mikael Miller in that ball game, but Mikael goes out there and gets him a taste of big-time college football.
Yeah, and you know, when we talk about Brunetti, you know, being able to run, but you look at Mikael Miller, he's bigger than Barry Brunetti, and he's stronger, and he's the type guy, if you're around the goal line, you never know, you can put him in there, and he might can pile his way through.
In the end, it was a convincing 39-point win for Ole Miss. It was a game in which a lot of young players got experience. Free says they took 75 on the trip. All 75 played.
You know, it's so good to see young guys being able to play and have a lead like that, and instead of having to battle in the fourth quarter in a game that you're supposed to win big.
Well, when we come back, we'll take a look at this tall task in Tuscaloosa as the Rebels prepare to play the number 1 ranked team in the nation, the Alabama Crimson Tide, Saturday night at 8:15. Welcome back to Freeze Frame this week in Ole Miss football. I'm David Johnson along with Brendan Red, and there is a tall task for the Ole Miss Rebels in Tuscaloosa Saturday night. You are playing the number one ranked team in the nation, and Brendan, they look every bit like the number one ranked team in the nation, the Alabama Crimson Tide.
Yeah, and there's no question about it. If you watch them, they're big, they're strong, they're fast, they're going to hit you in the mouth, and they play so fundamentally sound. They know where they need to be on the field, and they have cornerbacks and can lock down wide receivers. They got linebackers that can chase down running backs. This team defensively is loaded. This team offensively is loaded, and there's no question that they deserve that number one ranking.
Just kind of setting the stage for you a little bit on Saturday night. This will be the 60th all-time meeting between Ole Miss and Alabama. The Rebels have only won 9 times. There have been 48 Alabama victories and 2 ties in this series. The Rebels are opening SEC play on the road for the 8th time in the last 10 seasons. Ole Miss carries an 8-game losing streak as far as SEC openers are concerned into this ball game.
Yeah, when you start looking at history and stats of this game, it's kind of scary, how the odds are so far against the Rebels. It really is kind of a David versus Goliath type matchup. This
will be the 9th time in the storied history of Ole Miss football that the Rebels have played a team ranked number 1 in the nation. The Rebels are 0-8 all time against number 1s.
Yeah, and yet again, I mean, when teams are number 1 in the country, there's a reason for that. They know how to play football. And Ole Miss Saturday, they got their hands full against one of the better teams in the country, and maybe one of the better teams in the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, and with all that said, there will be 101,000 plus screaming Crimson Tide fans in Bryant-Denny Stadium, a national television audience on ESPN, to see the outcome of this one. And on paper, if you were looking at the records, you go Ole Miss 3-1, Alabama 4-0. It's a pretty good ball game here. But when you start to break things down, this Alabama football team is so deep and talented at every single position. You start to see how tall this mountain is.
Yeah, and with an offense that we like to use that quick tempo, the problem with that is Alabama, when they sub somebody in, that second stringer, he's going to be just as good as the first stringer for most defenses. And so when their starters start to get a little tired because of our tempo, don't think that their second teamers are going to come in there and there's going to be that big of a fall off.
Yeah, that's one thing, and I think Hugh Freeze has taken that into consideration. If you go back to his Monday press conference, he was asked a question about his offensive tempo and what happens if the chains aren't getting moved, and the precarious situation that you may leave your defense in. And Freeze said, hey, that's something we have to factor in. That'll be part of our game plan this week. So, will you see that quick up-tempo pace at the beginning and see the Rebels back off of it a little bit throughout the course of the ball game or not? I think you will see it up front. I think you do what you do. You be true to who you are, and then see what adjustments you might have to make.
Yeah, there's no question. I think Hugh Freeze believes in the scheme he has and the system he has, and I think he's going to go out there guns a-blazing, and they're going to go quick tempo. Now, come second or third quarter, if there's been a lot of 3-and-outs, I'd have to believe that Freeze is going to say, okay, guys, let's slow this down a little bit and help our defense out.
And, Brandon, part of this up-tempo, quick attack that Ole Miss likes to run, where they like to snap the ball 75 to 80 times a game, is designed to wear down a defense. And you make an excellent point when you talk about depth that Alabama has. Against pretty much anybody else, when you can wear down the ones and the twos start coming in, advantage offense. At Alabama, depth is not a situation where it's just a guy in a uniform behind the starter there. There is quality depth, and it's more than 2 deep. It's sometimes, in some positions, 3 and 4 deep. So wearing down the Alabama defense, I don't know if that's an option for this Ole Miss offense Saturday night.
Yeah, and like you said, probably the only team in the country that has a third-string type players that can go out there and compete with anybody in the country. But Alabama has that. And then you look at our offensive line and stuff. Those guys get gassed a little bit in this quick pace tempo. So I hate to say it, but those guys will probably end up being more gassed than the second or third team players for Alabama, and might be advantage Alabama's second and third team there.
Well, we'll get to see how it all plays out. Saturday night, 8:15, Bryant-Denny Stadium, Tuscaloosa, Alabama. ESPN with the call, and it should be A humdinger, so to speak.
Yeah.
Looking forward to this one.
It'll be an exciting game. You know, it's always fun going against the number one team in the country.
When we come back, we'll take a look at the quarterbacks in this game. You're listening to Freeze Frame, This Week in Ole Miss Football. Welcome back to Freeze Frame. This week in Ole Miss football, I'm David Johnson along with Brandon Redd. And Brandon, some pretty good quarterbacks going to be playing in this ball game Saturday night in Tuscaloosa. Let's start off by looking at Alabama quarterback A.J. McCarron. Some people believe he's played well enough through 4 games this year to get some Heisman consideration.
You know, you look at McCarron, and it's hard to say he's Heisman worthy, but then you look at his stats and you say, you know what, at this pace, maybe so, maybe he is. But what's so impressive to me about him is that his ability to manage a football game. He doesn't make mistakes. He's always on pace, and he's a team leader. He's the type of guy you want on your football team.
This is no knock against former Alabama quarterback Jay Barker, but he reminds you a lot of Jay Barker, only more talented.
Yeah, he can make all the throws. He's got a strong arm. He's accurate, but he doesn't force anything. And under a Nick Saban-type offense, I know that sounds funny saying Nick Saban-type offense, but under that, that's his number one goal. Do not turn the ball over, and our defense will help you out.
And he has not turned the football over. Thus far, through 4 games, McCarron has completed 51 of 81 passes for 819 yards. But listen to this, 10 touchdown passes, 0 interceptions.
And that's exactly what you look for in a college quarterback. I mean, really, if you're looking for a pro-style quarterback, that's what you want, a guy that manages the game and doesn't make mistakes. He's setting himself up for a pro career. He really is, with his ability to not make mistakes and just to be accurate with the football. I'm a big fan of his, and I think he's a good ball player.
Yeah, no interceptions, and you mentioned he doesn't force the ball. Alabama doesn't have to pass the ball, or they haven't thus far this season, unless they choose to. They haven't really been in a situation where they've had to throw the football.
Exactly. You know, Alabama's bread and butter is always their run up the gut. You know, if we can go up the gut, then that'll slowly set up the pass. It should be interesting if Ole Miss could somehow stop the running game of Alabama and make them one-dimensional, what could happen. I know that's a big what if, but if that could happen, or if any team can do that, it should be interesting to see how A.J. McCarron handles that type situation.
Okay, let's hop back on the other side of the fence and look at the Ole Miss quarterback situation. Bo Wallace, nursing a sore shoulder, did not practice on Tuesday, hit the practice field for the first time this week on Wednesday. Both Bo and Coach Freeze expecting and very optimistic that he will start and play Saturday night.
Yeah, and you know, you look at Wallace, and he's got a strong arm, but you know, the psyche of Wallace after having that sore arm is really in question, because sometimes you injure that arm and you wonder, do I still have that same type zip that I had last week or 2 weeks ago? And so it should be interesting to see how Bo handles that, and if it does start getting a little sore during the game, then how does he handle that? Because you know Alabama's going to hit him a couple times. That's going to happen.
Yeah, that's the thing I think you need to look at going into Saturday night's ball game. Can the Ole Miss offensive line turn Bo Wallace into an untouchable? I don't think so.
No.
He's going to be touched, whether it's behind the line of scrimmage in the pocket or whether it's out in the open field on a run. Alabama is going to be able to lay hands on Bo Wallace. How will that shoulder hold up once the tide starts pounding on it?
Yeah, and you know, you see teams hit quarterbacks and they kind of drag them to the ground, but when Alabama hits you, when one of those big linebackers or one of those big defensive ends get through the line of scrimmage, that's a lot of weight weight, and that's a lot of power coming at you, and that's a lot of force. And that shoulder's going to have to be sturdy. That shoulder's going to have to be sturdy to handle that kind of hitting.
Yeah, and I think for this Ole Miss offense to be successful in Tuscaloosa on Saturday night, Bo Wallace has to be the guy that is taking the snaps. And that's no knock against Barry Brunetti, right, but Barry is not the passer that Bo Wallace is, and you're going to have to be able to throw the football. Yeah. And short throws and errant throws are going to get you in trouble very quickly with the Crimson Tide, and Brunetti will not be able to do to Alabama what he did to Tulane with his feet.
There's no question. You know, I think Alabama's number one goal right now is let's completely shut down the Ole Miss run. If we can do that, then let's hold Ole Miss to be one-dimensional. Let's make them pass, and I think that's what Ole Miss is going to have to do: a little dink, a little dunk, get a couple yards every throw, and move the chains. If we're not moving the chains, then we're setting ourselves up for failure.
Taking a look at Bo Wallace's statistics through 4 games, he has completed 55 of 86 passes for 717 yards, 7 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions. Brunetti, playing behind him, has completed 15 of 21 for 162 yards and a score.
Yeah, I mean, both those guys have been successful. Obviously, Brunetti has a little bit more success with his legs, able to juke people and run people over. But what's been amazing is Wallace's ability to run the football as well.
And will Freeze allow Wallace to run the football Saturday night against the Tide, knowing that he's got a sore shoulder?
That's a great question. You know, that shoulder, it can give out at any moment, especially when the Alabama guys are in his face.
No doubt about that. Okay, when we come back, we'll continue breaking down Saturday night's ball game between the Ole Miss Rebels and the Alabama Crimson Tide. You're listening to Freeze Frame this week in Ole Miss football. Welcome back to Freeze Frame this week in Ole Miss football. I'm David Johnson along with Brandon Red. We are discussing Saturday night's Ole Miss-Alabama game. Again, that's an 8:15 kickoff, ESPN television, live from Bryant-Denny Stadium in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. And we've talked a lot about the Alabama football program and how tall of a task it's going to be for Ole Miss to go into Tuscaloosa Saturday night and come out with a good showing. However, there's one Rebel that kind of has a perspective of they put their pants on just like the Ole Miss Rebels do, and that's Aaron Morris. And Brandon, you had an opportunity to catch up with Aaron earlier this week. Let's go to that interview now and listen firsthand to Aaron Morris.
I'm here with sophomore Aaron Morris. Aaron, just talk about how it's felt to be out here this week for practice and knowing you're about to play Alabama.
I mean, it's good. I mean, we just come out here, work hard, because we got a tough opponent this week, but, they're regular people just like us, so we're just going to go out and work hard.
Recently, SEC Offensive Lineman of the Week. Just talk about that a little bit. What did you do a little bit different last week to help get you that?
I don't know. I'm really just working to get better. I can't probably just focus more. Coach making me nervous. I don't know. Just going out, really want to get his job done.
Yeah, just talk about your skill set a little bit when you're on the field. What are some of the things that you feel, you're still young, you're a sophomore. What are some of the things you feel you do well, and what are some things you're still working on out here?
I feel like I can work a little better on everything that I do. But I just realize when I'm down, I just focus on what I got to do on that play, and I try to do it.
Well, what do you see from Alabama's defensive line? I mean, I know they're big and they're strong, but what are some of the things you guys are trying to focus on as you head into Tuscaloosa?
Really, just to block them, Like, we know they're strong, we know they're fast and stuff, but, hey, they're human beings just like us.
How excited is this team for this challenge? They're the number one team in the country. How excited are you guys?
Very excited. We get to play on television. We get to play with against the #1 team. We get to show them. I mean, we've been working too.
Yeah.
You know?
Coach Freeze said this could be, kind of a David versus Goliath type thing. But, I mean, what's it going to take for you guys to go out there and get the W?
Playing hard, focusing, no mistakes, no little mistakes, just playing hard every play.
I'm here with sophomore offensive lineman Aaron Morris. We appreciate your time, man.
All right, there you hear it straight from Ole Miss offensive lineman Aaron Morris, who was the SEC Offensive Lineman of the Week this week, or maybe I should say is the SEC Offensive Lineman of the Week this week. I love what he says, though. They're regular people just like us.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the mindset of this Ole Miss football team right now, that they're #1 in the country, and they're going to hit us some, but we have to be prepared for that. But at the end of the day, they're human beings. You heard him say that. They're human beings, too. And I think they're excited about this challenge, and I think they're confident in their skill set. I really do.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think they did learn something. As Coach Freeze has said, he thought his football team learned something from that primetime beatdown Texas gave them 2 weeks ago. And we'll see. We'll see Saturday night whether or not Ole Miss did learn something against playing an opponent such as Texas, one of the giants of college football. You got to turn right back around and do it again tomorrow night.
And you look at, and you want to talk about building confidence. It was that Ole Miss offense that really built confidence against Texas, because though we allowed 66 points, we did put up 31 points against Texas. And anytime you ask any of these guys on offense, they feel like they can score points against anybody. They thought that was a pretty good Longhorn defense they played a couple weeks back, and they know Alabama's going to be good, but I truly believe they feel like they can score points against them.
Yeah, I do think Ole Miss can score points against Alabama on Saturday night. I think they're going to have to establish the pass before they get the run game going, though. You got to look at Alabama. Alabama opened up with Michigan, a quarterback like Denard Robinson, who can do it with his arm and do it with his feet, and they shut him down.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's absolutely amazing that a team can shut down one of the most versatile players in college football. And he couldn't run, he couldn't throw. It was really amazing to watch that defense in action.
It definitely was, and it's going to be fun to watch Freeze's spread against Alabama's they're a physical defense, bottom line. They're not going to do anything differently because they're playing a fast-paced, up-tempo offense Saturday night other than go out there on the field, line it up, and hit you in the mouth every single play.
Yeah, and I think you were dead on when you said at the end of the day it's going to come down to how much protection and how much time does Bo Wallace get.
All right. When we come back, we'll continue breaking down the Crimson Tide and Rebels. You're listening to Freeze Frame this week in Ole Miss football. Welcome back to Freeze Frame this week in Ole Miss football. Okay, Brandon, let's start taking a look at some key matchups in this ball game and some things to keep your eye on. Statistically speaking, this one jumps out at me. The Ole Miss Rebels are averaging 5.8 yards per rush. Alabama is giving up an average of 2 yards per rush. Something's got to give.
Yeah, there's no question. You look at the Rebels right now, they're #1 in the SEC in rushing and number 11 in the country, but they have not seen a defensive line like they're about to see. It's going to be tough to kind of, find a little gap or a little hole, and there's not going to be many running lanes Saturday for the Rebels, and I think that's why we both agree that we're going to have to be able to pass the football to be successful Saturday.
Ole Miss will have to create running lanes by being successful in the passing game. That is the only way you're going to open up the rush lanes against this Crimson Tide defense, is if you make them respect what you can do with the pass.
Yeah, and you know, some fans might be saying, well, what about the read option? That opens up multiple lanes. But as we've already talked about, Michigan,
it'll be gobbled up just like that.
Just like that. With those linebackers, they're fast, they can move. And you look at Michigan, are they not one of the best teams in the zone read with Robertson and all that? And they had no success with it.
I think the best hope for Ole Miss to be able to run the football effectively is they must throw the football effectively. This is a classic case of setting up the run with the pass.
Yeah, you don't see it a lot, but it's one of the only ways to score points against Alabama, because they're going to be tight in there, and they're going to be, and that defensive line's spicy, and they're strong, and they're going to hit you in the mouth. But you gotta throw the rock.
Now, there's only so much you can do in the passing game with a quick 1 or 2 step drop. Eventually, if you're going to stretch the field, you're going to have to get protection from your offensive line. I'll put you on the spot. Can the Ole Miss offensive line protect Bo Wallace enough that he's comfortable enough to make his reads in the pocket and deliver the ball downfield effectively?
I look at our offensive line, and I think they've made great improvements. I think they're getting better every week, but what they're about to see Saturday, they've never seen before, and the physicality of this team, I want to say they're going to really struggle Saturday against the blitz. And Alabama's kind of fundamental. Sometimes they'll take a step back, but simply no, I don't think we're going to be able to.
And then when you look at things from the Ole Miss defensive perspective, and there was a lot said about guys not being in the proper gaps and things of that nature in the first couple of ball games, linebackers not filling where they need to fill and everything. The problem with Saturday night is you could play a perfect game as an Ole Miss linebacker, but you got to bring enough tail to the gap you're trying to fill to not get blown out of the water, and that could be problematic.
Yeah, there's few teams that I know that run a better power running game than Alabama. They get to the second level so quick, and those guys are fast, but more importantly, they're strong. So first off, you have to work getting off a big offensive lineman, and as we know, our linebackers aren't the biggest in the SEC by far.
Correct.
So that's going to be something we're going to have to work on, and we really struggled against Texas.
That is another area to watch Saturday night. And then, and just looking at the, I suppose, the intangibles, back off and just see how long Ole Miss can make a game of it on Saturday night. Are the Rebels still lingering around at halftime? If you're lingering around at halftime, then you can have a legitimate goal of being able to linger around heading into that fourth quarter. And then anything can happen, but you got to get through quarter number 1 and quarter number 2 with it still being a ball game before you can think about that.
And really, no team so far this year has been able to linger around a whole half with Alabama. If you can do that, it's exactly what you said. You build a little momentum, you start believing in yourselves, and if we can get to the fourth quarter with a close game, anything can happen.
Okay, the Vegas odds makers put the spread on this game, and it's fluctuating depending on what you look at, between 31 and 33 points, advantage Crimson Tide. Brandon, it's time for our picks. How do you feel the Rebels will fare Saturday night in Tuscaloosa?
Well, it was a tough pick, and I'm just going with my gut here. I think Rebels get better every week, but I got Alabama 48, Ole Miss 17.
I won't elaborate on it very much other than it's painful.
Yeah.
Alabama 45, Ole Miss 24. That's my pick.
Yeah, and a lot of credit now we both agree, it goes to Alabama and how good they really are. They're a great football team.
If I had a vote in the poll, they would get all of my number ones.
Everyone, and I've picked Alabama to win national championship the last 4 years, and I've been right a pretty good bit of the time.
And pretty much everybody else in the country is doing the same thing already. I mean, preseason, there were some media types out west and up north that want to give a nod to USC or Oregon, but four games into the season, you see what's real and what's not real, and it's Alabama again.
It is. That they're great. They got a great coach, and they got the athletes to get the job done.
All right, for Brandon Redd, I'm David Johnson. Thank you all for joining us this week for Freeze Frame This Week in Ole Miss Football.